Hey, Altus Flores. So we're going to continue simplifying fractions today with another activity. So this is our activity. We've got quite a few problems. We've got 10 slides where we just have one fraction that we're simplifying. And then we've got 2 slides where we're matching our answers in our answer bank to the proper fractions. So let's look at our first one to review. We've got 12/16. So when we are thinking about simplifying fractions, we need to first make t-charts, right? I'm going to make my t-chart for 12 and my t-chart for 16. So for 12, I know I've got 1 times 12. I've got 2 times 6. And then 3 times 4. That's a 3, sorry. 3 times 4. And then 16, and I've got 1 times 16, 2 times 8, and then 4 times 4. Oh, let me extend this line. So looking at my t-charts, you got to make sure that all of your multiplication problems to get those numbers are included in your t-charts. You need to find your greatest common factor looking at those numbers. So looking at those numbers, I can see that they've got 2 in common. And they've also got 4 in common. So our greatest common factor is going to be 4, because it's the greatest of those 2 numbers that they have in common. So since 4 is their greatest common factor, 4 is what I'm going to divide both 12 and 16 by to get my new numerator and denominator. So I'll do 12 divided by 4 to get my numerator, and I'll do 16 divided by 4 to get my denominator. And I will type that in these boxes. Well, 12 divided by 4 is 3, right? And 16 divided by 4 is 4. So that means that 12/16 simplifies to 3/4. And that's what we're doing on slides 1 through 10. Obviously, I wrote on my Google slide using my Screencastify tool. Depending on what software you are using, you may or may not be able to write on these. If you cannot write on the slides, then you need to make sure you are doing this work that I just did out on the side on a separate sheet of paper for every single problem. Now for slides 11 and 12 and 13, you've got multiple problems per page. So on 2/14, for instance, you've got 2/14, 2/12, 7/14, 8/20, 9/15, and 6/18. You've got all your possible answers right here. Each answer will be used once on depending on what question you have. So let's do 2/14 real quick. 2/14 is one of those fractions that you could probably simplify mentally, because 2, if I were to make a t-chart for 2, 2's prime. 2's only factor that you can really divide by when simplifying would be 2, right? So can 14 be divided by 2? Yes. So you could do 2 divided by 2 to get my new numerator, and then 14 divided by 2 to get my new denominator. And we're going to look at our answer bank to see which matches that. Well, 2 divided by 2 is going to be 1, right? And then 14 divided by 2 is going to be 7. So I need to look at for my answer bank to find which one is 1/7. 1/7 is right here. So you're going to take it and you're going to drag it and you're going to put it in this box. Just like that. Let me erase what I wrote. So you know with 2/14 is equal to 1/7. And you're going to continue that for the rest of the problems. So that is our assignment today. I'm going to attach the simplifying fractions video from yesterday, the instructional portion of it, right after this. So if you want to continue watching that because you either didn't watch yesterday's video or you need that little extra review on T-charts and things like that, that will be coming up right after this. Let me know if y'all need anything, and we will go over whatever questions on this assignment that y'all want to when we meet up later today. Let me know if y'all need anything, and have a great day, guys. Bye. Stay tuned for the video lesson from yesterday if you need extra assistance. Hey y'all, it's Ms. Flores. So today we are going to learn how to simplify our fractions. Yesterday we learned when we should simplify fractions, whether or not fractions had a common factor that you could divide both numerator and denominator by, or if it didn't. Well, today we are only going to deal with the fractions that can be simplified, and we're going to learn how to do that. Alright, so when simplifying fractions, it's important that you need to find the greatest common factor of your numerator and denominator. So let's look at our first one, for example. We've got 16/24. So this fraction can be simplified. So our first step in simplifying, what we're going to do is we're going to find the factors of 16 and 24. So let's find those factors. So I'm going to make my T-chart for 16 and my T-chart for 24. 1 of 16 is 1 times 16. And now I could also do 2 times 8. And I could also do 4 times 4. 24, I can do 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. So I'm going to look at those list of factors, and I'm going to find the greatest one that they have in common. So they've got 2 in common, 4 in common, and 8 in common. But the greatest one they have in common is 8. So since 8 is their greatest common factor, what I can do is kind of like finding equivalent fractions when we were multiplying to make our numerator and denominator look larger, to have more pieces. We're going to do the opposite. So what I can do to simplify this is I can divide both numbers by 8. And the reason why this works is just like when we were finding equivalent fractions, right? Because when I divide by 8 over 8, I'm basically dividing my whole fraction by 1. So it does not change the value of this number. It just puts those pieces back together to where I have less pieces. So when I divide 16 by 8, I end up with 16 by 8 divided by 8 is 2. And then 24 divided by 8 is 3. So my simplified answer ends up being 2/3. So basically what we're doing when we are simplifying fractions is we are doing the exact opposite of what we were doing when we were finding equivalent fractions. These are still equivalent fractions because I could go in reverse and I could do 2 times 8 is 16, 3 times 8 is 24. They're still equivalent because of how we are dividing by 8 over 8. Since we're dividing numerator and denominator by the same number, it is keeping our fraction equivalent. It has the same value. It is just less pieces this time. Let's look at another one. All right, let's think about 7/49. So when we've got a numerator like 7, right? 7's prime. So when I make my T-charts, since 7's prime, my only multiplication that gets me 7 is 1 times 7, right? So I'm basically needing to make sure that 49 can also be divided by 7. That 7 times something is 49. Well, when I make my t-chart, I know 1 times 49 is 49. I also know that 7 times 7 is 49, right? So since they do have 7 in common, I can divide both of these numbers by 7. So I'll do 7 divided by 7, and I'll also do 49 divided by 7. Remember, this works because when I do 7 over 7, I'm basically dividing by 1. So it keeps it proportional, right? 7 over 7 is 1 whole. When I'm dividing by 1, my number stays the same. But since we're writing 1 a little differently, it changes the way my number looks. So 7 divided by 7 is 1. 49 divided by 7 is 7. So our simplified fraction is 1/7. Let's look at our next one. We've got 10/60ths. So our first step is to write our t-charts for 10 and 60. So I know 10 is 1 times 10 and 2 times 5. 60 is 1 times 60, 2 times 30, 3 times 20, 4 times 15, 5 times 12, and 6 times 10. So when I think about their common factors, they've got 2 in common, they've got 5 in common, and they've also got 10 in common. So if I wanted to simplify, I could simplify this fraction by any of these numbers, because they can both be divisible by 2, 5, and 10, but the fastest way to do it is to divide it by their greatest common factor, which would be 10, right? Because if I divided both these numbers by 2, or if I divided both these numbers by 5, I would still be left with a fraction that I can still simplify some more. So we're going to divide both these numbers by 10. Because remember, we're basically dividing our fraction by 10 over 10. So we are dividing it by 1. So our fraction is still equivalent. Our fraction is equivalent because we are dividing by 1. Our value is not changing. So 10 divided by 10 is 1. 6 divided by 10 is 6. So our simplified fraction ends up being 1/6. So 10/60ths is equivalent to 1/6. All right, let's look at 2 more. Let's look at 12/20ths. So first step is t-charts. We've got t-chart for 12. Oops, wrong one. T-chart for 12 and our t-chart for 20. Well, 12 is 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. It's important that you're writing all of the ways that you can multiply to get your number on your t-chart, so that way you don't end up forgetting their greatest common factor. 20 is 1 times 20, 2 times 10, and 4 times 5. So I'm going to look for all their common factors. They've got 2, 4, and that's all they've got in common, right? So the greatest of those 2 is going to be 4, right? Because I could divide both these numbers by 2, but I would still have to end up dividing them again. So I'm going to divide both of my numbers by 4, right? And so the reason why that works is because when I'm dividing by 4 over 4, I'm basically dividing by 1, right? So I can do 12 divided by 4 to get my new numerator, which is 3. And I can do 20 divided by 4 to get my new denominator, which is 5. So my simplified fraction is 3/5. You can always check to make sure that these fractions are simplified also, because I can look at 3/5 and I can say, okay, well, 3 is prime. 3 can only be divided by 3. 5 cannot be divided by 3. So since it cannot be simplified anymore, it is in simplest form. So 3/5 is 12/20 in simplest form. These are equivalent fractions. Let's look at our last one together before we talk about our assignment. We've got 3/27. So let's make our t-charts. Well, 3, that'll be easy, right? 3 is prime. You can only get 3 by doing 3 times 1, right? So that means when I'm making my t-chart for 27, I'm on the lookout for 3, right? Because it can only be divided by 3. 3 can only be divided by 3. So 27 is 1 times 27. It is also 3 times 9. So 27 can be divided by 3, right? So when I do 3 divided by 3 to get my new numerator, 27 divided by 3 to get my new denominator. Remember, this works. Why? Because 3 over 3 is equivalent to 1. When I'm dividing by 1, I am not changing the value of this number. I am just changing the way it looks, right? So 3 divided by 3 is 1. 27 divided by 3 to get my new denominator is 9. So my final answer ends up being 1/9. I know that this is in simplest form, that this is simplified because I have a 1 as my numerator. Remember when we were talking about our rules yesterday? That if I've got 1 as my numerator, that it's definitely a fraction I can't simplify, right? Because 1 can only be divided by 1, and dividing by 1 isn't going to change anything. So 3/27 is equivalent to 1/9.